We're going to start verse 36 and finish through the end of the chapter. We have been looking through the Gospel of Luke forever, seemingly. Now, some of you don't remember that, but I have been preaching through this book on and off for about 4 years. So it's been a long time, a good journey, but it is coming to a conclusion today. And then after this, I thought we could go back and start Luke again. All right, good. One person was happy about that. No, after this, we will actually be going through the book of Haggai, because I knew that was much more engaging for all of you. And everyone, when they hear Haggai, go, yes! I have been waiting for a sermon series on Haggai. So I thought I'd present that one for you. And then after that, we will look at the spiritual armor sort of in-depth week by week. So that's where we're going. But here's where we are now, finishing Luke. As we saw last week, we saw that after Jesus had been crucified, after he'd been turned over to the authorities and crucified, and very dead, very physically, bodily dead, that on that Sunday morning, on that third day, he was raised from the dead by the power of God. Not only was he raised from the dead, but then people started seeing him. First, they heard reports of him. People see that the tomb is empty. And then we saw last week as two people were walking down the road to Emmaus on their way there, that they are, a third person comes along and starts to talk to them, that person being Jesus. But their eyes aren't open to who he is until he explains to them everything that was going on and how everything in the Old Testament linked to him. And then at that point in time, they sit down to have a meal. As he breaks the bread, they are able to understand who he is and see who he is. They're like, it's Jesus! And then he disappears. Perfect. So they run and they tell the disciples who are gathered together on this day, wondering what's going on. There's all kinds of talk, all kinds of confusion. A bunch of women have said that the tomb is empty, that they're told that Jesus is alive. Why look for the living among the dead? All of these strange things. Now these people come and they tell them, yeah, we saw him, he's here. And just as Peter, just as the women say, it's true, he is here. And then we pick up the story in Luke chapter 24, starting in verse 36. Luke writes, while they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, peace be with you. They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. He said to them, why are you troubled, and why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have. When he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet. And while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, do you have anything here to eat? They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence. He said to them, this is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms. Then he opened their minds so they could understand the scriptures. He told them, this is what is written. The Christ will suffer and rise from the dead on the third day, and repentance and forgiveness of sins will be preached in his name to all nations, beginning at Jerusalem. You are witnesses of these things. I am going to send you what my Father has promised, but stay in the city until you have been clothed with power from on high. When he had led them out to the vicinity of Bethany, he lifted up his hands and blessed them. While he was blessing them, he left them and was taken up into heaven. Then they worshipped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy. And they stayed continually at the temple, praising God. So as the men are running and telling the disciples and others gathered that Jesus is alive, he appears before them. He appears before this group of disciples who have walked with him, journeyed with him for 3+ years. And they are simply amazed and bewildered. So, of course, his first comment to them, his statement is, "Peace be with you." This is a common expression, a common phrase, a common form of greeting, but it means so much because when Jesus is saying it, that word peace encompasses a wholeness, a spiritual wholeness, a physical wholeness, a mental wholeness. Everything is combined in that there is peace with them. And of course, as we've seen through the Bible, whenever someone greets another, or an angel or a messenger, or someone greets someone with the message of peace, what is their response? Fear. Right? These are strange occurrences, right? It is not typical for us in this day and age to be holed up in our house and suddenly for someone we saw die to appear before us. If that were to happen and they said peace, you could imagine that there would probably be a little bit of fear, right? Maybe just a little. Same thing with them. Even though Jesus had told them repeatedly, we get throughout the Gospel of Luke 7 times when Jesus is telling them about his death and resurrection. Sometimes very specifically, sometimes he alludes to it, but certainly there are 3 specific instances where he tells them more and more realistically and graphically each time what exactly will happen to him. Yet even knowing that and hearing that, when they see him, they're flabbergasted. They don't know what to do, and they think that he is a ghost. They know that there are things beyond what we can see in this world, but they don't really know how to explain it. So the most simple explanation for them is that he is a ghost. He's an apparition appearing before them, and so he goes to great lengths to confront this. Now, as he is confronting these things, he is really speaking not only to these people, but also to people in our day and age, because we live in a day and age where things like ghosts, things like vampires, things like zombies, the undead, and all of this we are very aware of these sort of things. Some people are very intrigued by them. You can watch multiple shows on television and movies about these things. You can read many books about these things, and some of them may have validity. Most of them don't. But we are still intrigued by them. What Jesus does as he reveals himself in a bodily form before them is he answers many objections in their day and in our day as well. There are people in his day and in our day who will say he was not raised from the dead. That he died, he was put in the tomb, and that's the end of it. Here we have witnesses, a number of witnesses. Paul will tell us in 1 Corinthians, that there were more than 500 people who witnessed Jesus after his crucifixion. He was alive in bodily form. We can trust in 500 witnesses, right? 1 or 2 you might be skeptical. 500 people who would put their lives at stake to say, yes, Jesus was raised from the dead. We saw him. He is not a ghost.